restorative justice campaigner, founder of 5 Steps to Freedom, and recovery coach. Will Raily is the founder of Why Me, the first charity to champion the rights of the victim for restorative justice. As a victim of crime and a beneficiary of a restorative justice conference, he was amazed by the effect of the meeting on him, his wife, and the perpetrator. It has been life-changing for all 3, and nearly 20 years on, he continues to believe that it is the fairest form of justice. It returns to the original form of Anglo-Saxon criminal redress, where the perpetrator met his victim and needed to explain to his victim, or victims and peers, why he did what he did. And they in turn told him directly the effect of his actions, thus cutting out the legal middlemen and addressing the victim directly, placing the victim in the center of judgment, not the crime against the state. It is a privilege to welcome and invite William Raily and Peter Woolf to the stage.
And I'm not Will, they're much bigger than I am. But we will start with a little film. Some of you might have seen the film. For those who haven't, we will present it, and then we will have a little conversation following it. So here's the film. Yeah, with the internet. Big screen.
I couldn't really even begin to tell you how many crimes I've committed. I was once described as a walking crime wave. I was quite chuffed by that. I've always drunk. I used to have a drink even as a kid. It was a way of life. I started taking drugs when I was 10. So, all of a sudden I looked round and I was sticking needles in my throat. I was an heroin addict. I'd stayed in a squat over at East London, which I'll describe it to you. It was human waste all over the floor, syringes and empty beer cans everywhere, blood squirted up the wall from the syringes. My bed was an old mattress that we'd found in the dustbin, and my blankets were the clothes I slept in. I stunk to high heaven. That's how I lived. All this time I was taking other drugs, drinking copious amounts of alcohol, committing crime on a daily basis, sometimes on a multi-daily basis, 10 times a day crimes. It depended on how much you earn.
It's about 5 o'clock. I'm in my office, which is on the first floor, and it's time to go to the gym. I go upstairs, and as I walk up to the top landing, I push open the door, and there's a man that I've never seen before.
He says, "What are you doing?" I said, "All right, what are you doing in here?" And I give him some old flannel. I said, "Oh, I live over the road at number 2, and I see someone acting suspiciously, and I heard a funny noise."
And I said, "Where's number 2?
I said, "Over there." But unfortunately, it was over there. And so he knew I was telling lies, and he knew I was a burglar.
He unfortunately ran into a kitchenette we have on the top floor and shouted knife. And so I thought, God, now we're in real trouble.
And I had this guy after me, and I didn't get a knife. I got the top of the oven, heavy old thing, cast iron, and I smashed him over behind me.
Which hurt, but again, I'm pumping, so I didn't feel it very much.
He stumbled and we fought. And as we fought, we rolled down a flight of stairs, proper John Wayne stuff going on there. And there was a big old flower pot, and I picked it up and smashed him straight over with that. And I remember the blood coming out of his head.
And I kept going, and we bundled and fought. And I got him outside the door, and I said, help me. And he just looked like 2 middle-aged men having a ding-dong. And then the police car came, so obviously someone had to call the police.
The police pulled up and I nicked in the back of the van.
They said to me, are you okay? And I said, yeah, I'm fine. So they said, well, you're bleeding. And as I put my hand behind my head, I've got my whole head is just saturated in blood.
I'm not allowed to sit there feeling remorseful and sorry. It was just a bad day at the office for me, so I'm off to prison, and oh well, can't wait to get to prison, because get to prison, that means I can get some drugs.
My wife came to let me in hospital, and as I put the key in the door, I suddenly had a fear that there would be somebody on the other side of the door. And it happened day after day after day after day. It's not a very nice feeling. You feel scared. So about 2 or 3 weeks later, a police officer called me, and he said that we're conducting a study on a thing called restorative justice, where the offender meets the victim. Would you be interested in taking part?
If I'm honest, part of me sort of wanted to say sorry to this fella, but the majority of me only wanted to do the restorative justice conference to get out of the cell for an hour. Suddenly this day came, and the square of the prison officer opened my door. It was at lunchtime, and he said, "Come on in." I'm walking along this passageway. Whether or not it's true, I don't know, but apparently the squirrels used to say this was where the condemned man used to go. And at that very moment, I started to feel like a condemned man. I'm thinking, I don't really want to do this. I don't want to go and meet the victims of my crimes. I don't want to meet anyone. I just want to go and lay in my bed. And we get up to the door, and I'm thinking, I don't want to be here. I just don't want to be here. Just as I went to say it, the door opened,
and there is a guy I fought about 2 months earlier, and he's in the sort of prison garb and looking really sheepish. And I'm beginning to think, what the hell are we doing here? But anyway, it's going to happen. Whatever it is, it's going to happen. So here we go.
So I started going on about the poor old me's and how I've had an hard life, and give all the social spiel, because all my life that's what I've done, give social spiel to probation officers and social workers. I thought I had everyone eating out the palm of my hands.
He's just going through the movements, just going through the same old lines, the same old trite. And I'm beginning to get very, very annoyed, very, very annoyed.
And it came to a point, and I said to
Will, when we first met. And that's it. And I just lose it completely.
And he started listing all the things that I've done. And he also started listing his feelings.
And it comes out like a fire hydrant. And I said to him, we meet at some bloody cocktail bar in Islington. You broke into my house. You destroyed my one belief that I had, which is my ability to protect my family, my house, from people like you. And you did it in one fell swoop.
I never knew it made people feel sad, angry, bad, depressed, isolated, guilty about the things I've done. Yeah? I didn't know.
Peter was just, it was like a train. You could see that he thought, God, I've done this.
That was like a flow of emotions started coming out. And I never realised it. I just never realised the damage I've done. I never realised the harms I've caused. I never realised how many people it affected.
And he was a man who wasn't showing remorse because the lawyer had said, you got to show remorse and get time off. He was a man who was genuinely affected by what we had said. And we start conversing, we start talking, and Peter starts talking. He starts talking from his heart, from his real core of his existence.
When you hear the damage what you have done, when you hear the harm you've caused, you've got to be a very, very bitter and twisted human being if this doesn't affect you. You've got to be a sicko. I was fully expecting these people who I've done a lot of harm to say, lock him up, give him the bird, throw away the key, we don't care. But I was quite amazed. So I went back to that cell and sat there with all these feelings, and I sat with them for a long time trying to work them out and separate them.
You can't just leave him there. You've got to help him help himself. So therefore we then went out and said, listen, we want to see you change. We want to see you get yourself together. We want to help you in this process.
We'd like to see him address his alcohol problems. We'd like to see him address his offending problems. We'd like to see him maybe get some education. And we'd like to see him even get a job when he gets out.
In a court of law, the victim sits in the public gallery. he, she, his family, his loved ones are the most affected by this crime and then the least involved in the process.
They don't get no input into it, and there's questions that need answering, and they can't possibly answer these questions unless they meet the harmer, the wrongdoer, the villain of the piece, the criminal.
And that's all this is bringing people around. It won't have to be a prison table, but it could be anywhere, and having them say, well, why did you do that? Do you understand how that affected me? Do you understand how that affects other people? Ever since we first met, we continue to meet. We have become, both of us, utter converts to restorative justice, to restorative approaches, to bringing offenders and victims together.
Because of that conference, it initiated change, it implemented change. I implemented change, but it sort of gave me a kickstart I needed. I can't express gratitude enough for the restorative justice program, and I've got to leave it there for a minute.
Okay, today we are more than 20 years later. Every time I show it to my student, there is always the question, well, for how long would it work? How long would this kind of agreements, how long do they have an effect?
I couldn't really even begin to tell.
Apologise. So 20 years later, I would like to answer these questions. I would like to invite Will and Peter for their last jig, or last gig. It is actually the last time that they would talk about this restorative justice meeting. And it's a very special occasion because they are handing it on to the younger generation.
Where are they? I'm only young. No, they've eaten, they've gone off. It's the younger generation. Do we need these?
Can you? Yes. It's better with it.
Want me to?
Okay.
Does this work? Can you hear me?
Will, we will start with you if it's okay with you, Peter.
Yeah.
20 years later, you mention in the film you can't just leave him there. You and your wife Francesca, you come to the meeting and you put out a hand for Peter. How did this affect you in the short run and in the long run?
Sure. I think I said the reason I can't just leave him there is that we live in Islington. Pentonville's our local. We're both very busy, and we thought, why do we want to go to Pentonville Prison, on a Thursday morning to meet this guy who's broken into our house, caused havoc? Why would we want to do that? So we then eventually decided to go. So we go, and I think, well, we better get something out of this because, I'm wasting my time, wasting Francesca's time. So when we got through the process, I thought, well, in a sense, if he's not going to do something, he's pissed on our goodwill, our thoughts towards doing this process. And we want to see him do well. We want to see if we can help him change. And so we set out a plan that he was going to write us and that he was going to tell us what he was doing to reduce the number of drugs, alcohol, educate himself and get himself out. And he did, which is remarkable. Why did we think that? Because in the process, the structure that is an RJ conference, I could see that he was a very decent human being. And I could see, I'd heard his past, but I could see his past. Could you see it in his whole body and it was his body language and his face, that he needed a break. And there we were. And, humanity just struck. It just said, listen, this guy needs a break. Let's give him a break, Let's see what we can do. And it worked. So, that's why.
And may I ask you about your personal feelings? How did the process that took place, how did it affect you? Because you described the fear that was every time that you put the key in the door lock. Is it still there, if I may ask?
No, having met Peter and having realised that it wasn't anything personal. He hadn't been standing outside our house for the last 3 weeks to find out when we were there and when we were not there, when was the best time to break in, when was not to break in. And it was very obvious from how he'd explained what he was doing. It was a completely selfish act. He was completely opportunistic. We just happened to have a door that was easy to break into, so he broke in. So we didn't really want to. We were curious. I think curiosity got us to the door. But because it was a conference that was extremely well structured, with a very good, compassionate police officer who was running it, who we both liked actually. We felt comfortable, but until he just really, sorry to use this expression, it's very English, pissed me off, which means annoyed me by saying when we first met, I was just bored. And then he said that, and I thought, God damn it, this guy, he's broken into my house. I mean, you can imagine this, you're a parent and you're in hospital and your daughter arrives with the nanny and there are police officers all over your house and the police officer saying, your daddy's been a brave man, and wife comes home and says, well, he's in hospital. I mean, it's the worst fear you can have. And that's what he did to me. And then he says, oh, we met when we first met. And you're thinking, rubbish. We didn't just meet in a cocktail bar. You broke into my house. You destroyed the one thing that I thought I had control of, which is my house and my family and my children, what goes on there, and you just buggered it up. And and you can feel it coming back, and it's 20 goddamn years later, and you think, how dare you do this? How dare you do this to any human being, let alone to me and to my wife and my, it's not that I'm proprietorial, but, and then, so what am I going to do here? Am I just going to sort of scream and run out and say, to hell with you, lock you up and throw away the key? Or I'm going to try and do something constructive. And then when he spoke and responded, you could see that I was talking to him, as opposed to all this sort of social worker spiel that came out when he first started. And I thought, gosh, I'm communicating here. Actually, what I'm saying is got an audience. And maybe I can do something here, and maybe we can change a fellow human being. And, everybody deserves a break, and maybe I can do something. And maybe I can do something worthwhile. And then we went through this, and we came out exhausted. And I put the key in the door, no longer an issue. And then I felt I could sleep at night, because I was no longer a victim. I was no longer the guilty man who didn't have a correct lock system on his door, who didn't, who wasn't being signaled out as to easy prey. I had gone past that. And then I was on about actually how I could help him and how I could help other people and how this tool, which is restorative justice, could change people's lives for the better. And I'm still to this day so sad that we're still talking about how it can change people's lives, because it very well should have. You know, it should be used worldwide in every criminal justice system in the world. And I feel that I've failed in one respect because it's not. And it's a great, great pity. And we talk about forgiveness, we talk about looking into humanity, we talk about shame, we talk about guilt, we talk about, you know, understanding people. And this is the greatest tool to help that happen, to help that start, that process start, and it's not being utilized. And it's very sad. Anyway, sorry.
Thank you. Did Peter apologise in the meeting? Did he say, I'm sorry?
Well, you know it. He doesn't say sorry, real.
I know that there was a radio interview where you said that...
It was on Jeremy Vine on BBC Radio 2, and we're sitting in the studio with our cans on, you know, all professional. And Jeremy Vine says, "So what was it like, Will, when Peter said sorry?" And he looked across at me. He was sitting on the other side of the studio, and he said, "He's never said sorry." And do you know, I was so shocked at that, because in my heart, I'd said it 1,000 times. Yeah, I was so shocked. And it was like, because that was hard work. That was really hard. That day was hard work in that studio. But the whole thing that we went through together was really hard work, to try and describe what happened on that day, to try and describe the process, really does the process an injustice, I think, you know, because it's so personal. It's such a personal thing. You know, it was. I thought I was a clever guy. I thought I was. No, but you know, I was saying I'd read all these books. I'd been in prison most of my life. I spent 18 and a half years in prison, and blah 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 blah. And I read all the classics, and I read all the psychology, and I studied this and I studied that. And I read Desmond Morris, Man Watching, and I thought this was my Messiah. You know, he can show me how to tell lies efficiently. And this is what I've done. I went into that meeting with the Desmond Morris syndrome, you know, and, you know, the habitual behaviour patterns and all that, and nodding in the right places and rubbing my head when I was supposed to look stressed. And this is how it was going until
I read the book.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And suddenly I say, when we first met, and I often think back to that, because I seem to remember that you weren't quite that eloquent at that moment in time, right? But, yeah, but it told me, and I thought, you know, so you have to understand this. What I'd done, what I was doing, the act of criminality, you know, because it's such a selfish act, you know, criminality in itself is such a selfish thing. And there's no justification for it. There's no justification for hurting another human being. There's just no justification. But until that moment, until this restorative approach, this restorative conference, whatever we call it, I'd never really give the other person a thought. Yeah, I didn't really care about me, so I'm not going to care about you. This was basically it. And I think for me it opened up. First of all, it opened up so many doors for me. This process. I can remember you saying to me, Will, you said to me, you know, you're a clever man. And I thought, aye, he's not supposed to say that. You know, he's supposed to say, you're a bad man. Because all my life, people have said, you're bad. You're from day dot, you know, from when I was a little kid, my granddad used to say to the other parents in the street, don't let your children play with Peter, he's bad. Yeah, this is what my granddad used to tell people. So I grew up being bad, you know, and I used to get affirmation for being bad. So the badder I was, the more affirmation I seemed to get. And then to be told after all them years that, you know, you're a clever guy, and the doctor who was there, he said, you know, you're quite a nice guy, but what you've done wasn't very nice. And pretty much like was said this morning, you know, separating the act from the actor, and just these little things. There's a lot of humanity around the whole thing, you know, writing to each other, you know, writing, telling you how I got, you know, and Kim, the facilitator, going that extra mile, coming up to see me, getting me on, I don't know if it was called Zoom then, but whatever, you know. And as time went by, first of all, I felt that I owed it to you, yeah, to make the effort. But as time went by, it got deeper and deeper, you know. It weren't just about I owe it to you guys, I owed it to me, yeah. But I didn't realise that I had to reach a place. First of all, I had to. It went in stages, the whole thing. First of all, it was having empathy, having an understanding for, because you represented, suddenly you guys, you took on the role as representatives to all the people I'd harmed. And blinking hell, you know, that was a lot. You know, we're talking a lot of people. And it just got deeper and deeper and deeper. I had an understanding. I started getting empathy around it, and I felt guilt. I felt shame. I felt empathy, and I started understanding how my actions had impacted on my fellow human being, or on humankind. You know, and that's a big deal. That's something, you know, when you start understanding the impact you have on humankind, that's a bloody big deal, you know, no matter what. I can get emotional around it, you know, I can get emotional around it. It's, because it just, you know, this one moment we spent together, this 3.5 hours, the first 3.5 hours of positive dialogue, should we call it, yeah? It was suddenly opened my mind, but it opened my heart, yeah? And I don't want to sound all melodramatic and all that nonsense, you know, but it, you know, it changed my life. It changed my life without a doubt. It saved my life. If this intervention doesn't get a grip of me, I'd die within a year. There's no doubt about that. You know, I was heavily involved in drugs and alcohol, and, you know, I was not this guy. I was living on the streets, literally picking food up off the floor. So, you know, I was dead. But something happened, and I put that down to humankind, human kindness, human understanding.
But you know, we both talked about this. We had various conferences where we invited people who'd done far more remarkable things than I did with you. And we came away from the conference, and there were about 15 people talking about their experiences of meeting their offenders. And I stood back and I said, well, God, there's 15. A country's got, 60 million people in it. That's it. We found them, 15 people that could speak on our behalf, on behalf of victims within the process, but and who really knew it because they benefited from it and invested in it. And then I sat back and I thought, and so there are 15 remarkable people in Great Britain. And then I sat back and thought about it. Actually, these people are just lucky because they've been introduced to restorative justice, which is just a tool. And they've found and grown and finally done something worthwhile. And I felt exactly the same way. I mean, in this process, which I really resented going to the bloody prison, I say, but in meeting you And in seeing the effect of what the process was doing, I felt great. And then I found a charity, and I wanted to, push that forward and make sure that everybody's aware of that this was an opportunity, and this was an opportunity of becoming great, of finally getting together with yourself and helping fellow man, and finally resolving this, huge aggression that man has towards man, and unfortunately it often is man towards man, and breaking through it and saying, do you realize this is madness? Do you realize the effect of what you've done? You can't continue. And if you don't, we'll all end up dead, or we'll end up with no eyes. And so for me, it was very, very important. I second it to the birth of my daughter, is our meeting and what's come out of it. And I say, I'm saddened that it's not a tool that is used universally in any system where there's conflict.
I have a bee in my bonnet about the whole thing, really and truly. It's I'm really lucky. I go to I attend 12-step meetings. Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, which most people don't realise is where restorative justice came from. The research by Albert Eglash, he looked into the 12-step program, which, and this is how it was devised. It was about, I can't remember exactly what he called it, reparative justice or something like that. But it's, and I've been able over time to make amends, and the people I couldn't make amends to, I've prayed about, and that's the truth. And some very wise guy said to me, the people you can't make amends to, the best way to make amends is never to do it again. And so far, 21 years later, I've never done it again, and I've never taken drugs, I've never drunk alcohol, never committed crime, and this has all come out of this. This has all come out of it. But what really gets me is, I could get right on my soapbox at the moment, but it really gets me that there's so many people getting trained as facilitators of restorative justice, yet so little restorative justice or practices is being done in the UK. I can't talk about anywhere else. In the UK, it's like, I know for a fact that there's over 150,000 fully trained facilitators in the UK. And I know for a fact that only in the last 3 years it's gradually gone down. The Office of Statistics have shown that 7.3% people was offered restorative justice, 4.2% people was offered restorative justice, 2.1% people have been offered restorative, and it goes down. And this is after the Crime Commissioner says every victim of crime must be made aware of restorative justice. And it's not happening, it's just not happening. So why keep training people? This is what I want to know. Sorry. Esty.
Wow. And Will, if when you sat at the meeting, you could have looked into a crystal ball and see that in 20 years from then you will be sitting in Israel in a conference beside Peter.
Well, beside Peter is easy because we get together pretty regularly. We're in London, so that's not something. That's not particularly special, although it's great fun. In Israel, that's remarkable. That is fantastic because it's a great country. Yes, I sort of thought I would actually. When we founded YME, I thought it had real legs, and I thought this is going to really. I'm going to help people change their lives for the better. So I really did believe that, actually. And as I say, I look back 20 years, and it's been great to develop my friendship with Peter. We've had a lot of laughs. We've made a film, which I still think is not bad. It's not too dated. I mean, we're just as ugly as we were before. Well, that guy who plays me, it still pisses me off. Guts. Anyway, never mind. Next film. And in consequence, I've just, you know, I just feel, maybe it's just a grumpy old man or frustrated old man, it's a bit like you. I just feel it was there for the taking. It was really there, and there's, you know, everybody talked about the tipping point, and here we go, and so on and so forth. And it went off down here to train people, because with the police force in the UK, they just said, oh, think of re-traumatizing, think of the issues, and talking about the risk. You know, we talked about the risk, and Joe talked about the risk. And she said, well, I did my own risk, my own assessment, and so on. And there is clearly a risk. But if you understand people, you don't have that risk. You know, it's just there. You appreciate it. And it's just such, I mean, you know, just a wonderful example. I can bore you with this. Is that in a school, a teacher was given 3 days of restorative justice. And she says, he comes back to school. She says, I've got to use it. And there's a fracas in the corridor, and she calls the boys in. She says, oi, you two, in the two 12-year-old boys. They go into the classroom, and she's thinking, well, I'm going to, you know, they're going to give me detentions. You know, it's got the way to go. And she says, oh, well, maybe something I learned from restorative justice can help me. So she sits the two boys down, and she says, right, Johnny, what happened? And he said, well, miss, I went to the school playground, miss, and suddenly Dave's boot was in the back of my shirt. And so she turns around and says, well, Dave, you know, tell me what happened. And Dave said, well, I've just finished my anger management course, miss, and I rush into the playground, and my boot's in Johnny's shirt. And so at that point, Johnny bursts into tears. And the teacher says, well, you know, what's wrong, Johnny? And he says, miss, it's not fair. And she said, well, Johnny, what's not fair? He said, well, miss, we're not very wealthy, and my mum, you know, was really working hard cleaning, get the money together to buy this new shirt. And he's ruined it. He's ruined it. I can't go home. She'll just beat me. And meanwhile, Dave takes off his shirt, and they swap shirts. And you sort of think, you can't believe this. And of course, that's it. It's a complete result. They become great friends. No issue at all. And she's done nothing. And all they've done is the kid has understood someone that he didn't even know, like, you know, just a number. And that's the power of it. And how we don't use this, how this isn't the way to resolve all conflict all over, I just do not understand.
But look at the stuff, you know, with the Forgiveness Project, what we done in the beginning when we was going into the prisons and we was doing restorative workshops and you know, I can remember Peter Dawson at Highdown saying how, you know, through the workshops that we was doing with the Forgiveness Projects in those prisons, in that particular prison, which was a violent prison, that was a violent, suddenly there was a year's waiting list to get on the course, and the incidents of violence had been reduced by 90%. I remember Peter Dawson coming in and saying, I'm so pleased to have you here, so pleased that you're here. And this was just doing restorative workshops in prisons and getting people to think restoratively and getting people to own it. You know, I always remember a guy, he said, he was a drug dealer. And he said, I've got no victims. I said, okay. I said, how long are you doing? He said, I'm doing 7 years. And I said, you got any children? He said, 2. I said, and you got no victims? Yeah? And you got no victims. Simple as that. It's that simple. Yeah. I think we've done all right.
Yeah, no, yeah. It's just that, as I say, it's criminal that this isn't used. It's just wicked. I mean, you're sitting around, and everybody in the audience, like classic. It's like going to the Conservative Party conference, you're just talking to the converted.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you go out, talk to people who aren't. Yeah. You know, knock on the doors, bang. No,
and that's the thing, isn't it? That is the thing.
You know, persuade them, because it's the greatest tool.
It's the public awareness programs what need to be improved.
Don't talk about the bus, though. Don't go straight around. No, and that's what I feel. I feel great for what we've done. I've great meeting you. You know, we've had a great time together. I just feel frustrated. It could have been so much.
Yeah. Who knows? Perhaps Leah will sort it out or something. I don't know. Yeah, no pressure.
Well, it says democracy started about 300 years ago, and it's still not there. So we need to believe in the process.
What's democracy? Sorry.
That one. I would like to open the questions for questions from the audience. If you have a... Okay, we'll start with Gideon. And
Oh, I don't think you need a mic for this. I think I'm pretty loud. We heard at the beginning of the video Peter saying why he wanted to participate in this process. Maybe I missed it, but Will, did you share?
Yeah, no, sure, we did do that.
What basically motivated you to go in and start with it?
Well, it's a good question. Half of my friends said, lock him up, throw away the key. Really, they were really incensed, you know. They say, you know, it could have been me, you know, to hell with it. And then I'd always thought, I had a friend who went off the rails, and I always thought of visiting in prison. And it was really, it was the facilitator, really. It was this guy called, what's his name? Smith. Kim Smith. And he was a compassionate police officer. They do exist. And he just persuaded me. And he says, it was Kim Smith. It was a compassionate police officer. And he just persuaded me. He said, I think it'll be good for you. And so obviously he'd heard in me something that was uncertain and was concerned, and that I was wounded by the process, by the burglary, and he thought it could work. And I talked to my family, I talked to my mother, my wife, and we decided to go. And it was remarkable, and it did change my life. And then from there, I finally felt, you know, I'd always just made money. So I finally did something worthwhile, basically. Yeah.
So if I can project on this, you said it a lot. You didn't come, it's a forgiveness conference, right? You didn't come from a point of forgiveness.
No.
You were like,
No.
Yeah, let me see from a revengeful point of view where he is lost. So many times, if I'm trying to think about the entire process, a lot of people can get into forgiveness without even thinking about it.
Yes, that's true.
Just by getting to know the perpetrator, or
Yes.
it just, we are all human. This is what we are trying to basically say. Just try to figure out, and maybe you will get more understanding that will help you with the process of forgiving. Because obviously you forgive him. You didn't forget, but you forgive.
No, but the thing about it is you're curious, aren't you? I mean, in life, you're just curious. And what, you know, it was my local prison. I'm literally, walk there in 20 minutes. So I thought, well, that's not going to be a problem. If it told me to go to Scotland, I think I might have said, or told me to go to Tel Aviv, I think I might have said no. But, you know, it's just down the road. So you're just curious. And of course, I don't know any, you know, maybe this is department criminologists who've probably been in and out of prisons all your lives, but, you know, I'd never been in prison. I'd never known anybody who'd been in prison. You know, I didn't even know a prison chaplain. I mean, no, nothing. So when I arrived, I was horrified. You know, because, of course, English prisons are Victorian centres of reform, you know, and they're filthy and noisy and full of keys and doors and locks and gates and whatever. It's a horrible experience. And so I guess in that process, you quite rightly say, you say, well, hold on, why am I doing this? Is it a waste of time? How do I benefit somewhere? How do I do good by this process? And I was given it, the tool gave me that process, which is basically, what's the outcome? What would you like Peter to do? I mean, it's pretty clear. I wasn't going to say, well, you can rot in hell. I was going to say, you know, in English style, we had a cup of tea, and, you know, we chatted, we had biscuits, and, you know, very, very English. And we gave him an outcome, and he followed it, and, you know, it worked.
But also that process, for me, I can only talk for me, it allowed me, I gained tools on the journey, I gained tools, and these tools, it allowed me to forgive myself, yeah? And in forgiving myself, it then enabled me to forgive others. You know, and I won't go into all the bits and pieces of it, but you know, I walked about, like we heard from Robert earlier on, I walked about with a lot of resentment, a lot of hatred, a lot of anger, a lot of angst. And through this process, I was, you know, it enabled me to look deeper, really look deep into the soul. And yeah, so that's where the forgiveness came in for me.
So, sorry, did... Oh.
Did you want to say?
I just wanted to ask, following what you said, so did you get the feeling of being forgiven?
Sorry, you need to elaborate a little bit more there. Did I, what, in the meeting?
In and following the meeting?
Oh, I got the feeling that people understood. I got the feeling that suddenly I'd experienced empathy, I think. I think that may be the case. And it's not something that happens like that. This was a process. This was a process that we all had to go through. You know, we might have walked away in our different directions. You know, I went back to my prison cell, and I can still remember the prison officer's name, Mr. Terry. I can remember, you know, nice fella. And he said, how did it go? I said, I don't know. And he said, what do you mean? I said, I don't know. And I got back to the cell, and my friend Fat Gerald was in the cell next to me. And he said, and he banged on the wall, and he said, how did it go? I said, I don't know, Gerald. He said, well, you must know, you was there. I said, I don't know. I said, I've got no way of gauging this, because this is something that I've never experienced. He said, well, what? I said, I know how I feel. I said, I don't know how it went, because I can't talk for anyone else. He said, well, how did you feel? I said, I feel guilty. I feel ashamed. I feel awful. He said, what, have you gone off your head? Yeah? He said, have you gone crazy? I said, well, this is how I feel. And, you know, and I sat there, and like I said in the film, probably longer than a week, I sat there for months, really, processing what went on and processing the feelings, because this is where it really is. It's not, we can all be like academically astute, and you know, we can all do quantitative research, and we can do this and we can do that, but that feeling, you know, that day is like nothing else I've ever experienced.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the hardest 2 hours, whatever it was, that I've been through. You know, yeah.
Mm.
And it had, I knew when I fought you in my house that you really weren't funny.
Mm.
You really weren't funny, because you were a big boy and you've been around and you've done everything. You knew what to do and you weren't fighting. And I thought, there's something wrong here. This guy's given up.
Use your microphone.
Sorry. Use your microphone. Yeah, I'm using my microphone. You know, as I say, I knew, looking at your eyes, that you were on your last legs. You know, and so therefore, I suppose that was another. And because we've always had this, we've always been very close. We've always been physically very close, and we've read each other always very well. And I might say, I think one of the problems with restorative justice, certainly with someone like me, is thank God Peter's clever. Because if he hadn't been clever in having this conversation that he hadn't understood, and I had to re-explain it, I don't think I would have been so understanding. So I think that's me being probably too honest. But I think I was the buffer that you eventually hit that got you to change and got you to live. Mm. But I think basically you probably wouldn't have got through. You'd have taken an overdose and that would have been it. So and it's a bit of a, and I'll tell you, it was a weight on my shoulders that, the fact that I saved another human being's life. But, I could have saved many more. And that's what's so sad, I think. But sorry, I repeat myself.
Yeah, thank you. It sort of follows on from what you've already just been talking about, but I'm quite interested that for you, Peter, it seems like you had this initial conversation that was transformative, but it was the start of then an ongoing and sort of long time relationship that was kind of supportive and from what you've said, I think helped with addiction and education and job. But I'm sort of interested within restorative justice, how much are you two the gold standard, and how much would a shorter relationship span or a less supportive other half of it have these same outcomes? Does that make sense?
I don't think we're unique by any stretch of the imagination. There's, I can reel off success story after success story, and I've even, I became a facilitator myself, and I facilitated successful conferences where they're still successful, and I think probably our uniqueness is that we've become friends. Yeah, that we're just, what's happening? We're just two guys. Yeah, just two guys who like a cup of coffee and sitting about talking about what two guys talk about. Yeah, but are we the gold standard? Oh, I don't know. I can't blow smoke up myself. It's I have people come up to me, and I dare say Will has people come up to him and say, I feel like I've known you forever because I've seen your film so many times and blah-de-blah-de-blah. And I don't really know what to reply because, if I say, oh, that's nice. So,
Haven't heard of Netflix? It's on YouTube. It's by Netflix.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't know. To ask me to blow my own trumpet, I don't like it. I'm not,
Not necessarily as the best, but I guess I mean more in terms of the life-changing nature of it seems to...
No, I think it... You're in a room, you go in a room, why are you in the room? Okay? You both are dead curious as to, for you, okay, it was time out of the cell, but you were also curious, and I was curious. And if you have an intelligent facilitator who has great empathy, they understand. That there's it's a negotiation. Or maybe it's not a negotiation, but it's simple. Somebody's done wrong. You're around the kitchen table and you're saying, why did you do that? And if you're honest, that's pretty difficult to say. Well, I did this because I actually got to the lowest point in my life. And here I am verbalizing that to a complete stranger. And I'm saying, and I'm, big macho, I was, 6'4", 16 stone oarsman. I fought the guy, I've done well. And yet I was reduced to this fact of putting a key in the door and worrying about who'd be on the other side. That's a hell of a thing to admit, especially when you're English and you're stiff upper lip and your boys don't cry and all that. And here I am, admitting to myself and to my wife, who I saw myself as the protector of, my weakness and my worry and my concern. And then you're a father and your daughter comes home and the police tells your daughter's, your dad's in hospital and, he's a brave boy and they're all over the house. And she's 8 years of age, for God's sake. What's she thinking? Because of some selfish act. So it's already set up to be an odd meeting, and then people begin to talk, and if you're listening, and if the facilitator's good, things kick off, things that are said, and then you go on from there, and people come out changed. That's why this is this tool. They come out completely changed, usually for the better. So yeah.
So So I guess we talked briefly in the radio show that I'll just talk that. That you talked about forgiveness in the radio show, or no, you said you were sorry, Peter.
No, he said he thought he said he was sorry, but he never had.
So since we're about forgiveness today,
How about
can you
forgiveness?
talk about,
Have we ever talked about forgiveness?
well, actually,
Yes.
actually, did you feel a process in your heart through all this relating? Like, what was the process? If you have forgiven, and I don't want to assume that, what was that process? What happened that got you from point A to point B? Does that question make sense?
Mm.
Yeah.
We were asked, actually, weren't we? I was asked whether I forgave Peter, and I didn't have the answer, and I still don't, is the answer. But I suppose, I still don't. I still remember, it's interesting, we meet each other, whenever you're in London, we meet each other, 6, 7 times a year. We have a great time, the time flies by, and we've never met in my house. We've been near my house, but never in my house. And so, and it's not it's not a class thing, it's not a social thing. There's something, so yes, I haven't. But we've got closer. Would I recommend restorative justice to? I recommend anything, anytime, anywhere. Has it got easier? No, we still don't meet in our house. We don't. We never will.
We made a program.
We made a program.
Made a radio program.
We've done all sorts of things together, but he's never been
In their house. No, we made that chef.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. That's true. But again, we don't go there.
Yeah, no,
you don't meet me there.
Yeah.
Whereas we could, of course.
Yeah.
So there's something about that. I don't really understand that. But yes, forgiveness. I still don't understand fully.
Marina?
Really? Sorry, there's another question. Oh, this lady here. No? Oh, sorry. She's got the mic, yes. She's got the power.
Peter, you were saying how transformative it has been for you to hear how your acts have affected other people and that you had no clue. And I'm wondering if you can say something about the other way around. Let's say a person like me, I have a strong sense of my house, my safety, my staff. How does that affect people who don't have that, or like the other way around, to use transformative, restorative justice to explain to people who are upper class how they're taking more than their share, or how living their lives is harmful to other people, which is completely or mostly transparent.
Okay, so we're talking about capitalism, I suppose. I can't really comment on that because I was I suppose it's about social impact. This is a big thing. When social impact starts coming into play, there's a lot going on in the world at the moment. This is having massive social impact. So the people, the more are getting more, and the people are getting less and less and less. And how can we intervene to the people? We can't, because that's just capitalism, and the world's run on capitalism, and that's a fact. And I don't see how we can sit and explain, and we can try and point out that this, we want a socialist society. It doesn't work. We know it doesn't work. I'd love to see it working, but communism didn't work. If it collapsed, socialism, can it work? I'm not sure. I'm not sure about all this. Maybe I'm the wrong person to ask that question, really and truly. I'd like to see an equal distribution of wealth, but then again, someone who's worked really hard all their life to get that wealth, why should they distribute it? You know, I don't know. It's swings and roundabouts. I really don't know.
That can be maybe naively, but the secret weapon of hearing how it really feels for another person.
Absolutely. Basically, as I mentioned before, it's just a tool. Yeah? It's a tool for handling conflict. And what you're talking about is a conflict. And yes, you have to use it. Absolutely.
Maybe a follow-up. I mean, surely there's a very compelling economic rationale for what you're saying, because if you can cut reoffending, which is costing governments millions and millions with the reoffending rates, surely it's just a very obvious thing to say, restorative justice.
Yes, absolutely. But you think of the other people who go to see their doctor with stomach aches and headaches, and they're not sleeping at night, and actually it's because they've been a victim of crime. So you're absolutely right, and that can cost save millions as well. Unfortunately, these are the arguments we made 20 years ago. You know, we know about recidivism, and the conflict we had in the UK was you had the police force that saw it as a way of reducing recidivism, but our side we said, well, what about us? You know, we're the most affected by this crime, and yet we're the least involved. You know, so yes, I mean, the economic argument is so easy to make, and sadly, we haven't made it well enough.
And also, you look at, some years ago I was involved in some research and a project in Thames Valley. It was the Integrated Offender Management Programme, and I was attributed, myself and a police officer I worked with, we was attributed to reducing the crime rate in Slough by 48%. Yeah, this is massive. This is really massive. Yeah, and this was in 12 months. We reduced the crime using a restorative approach, practices, picking up people from prisons, and prolific offenders, PPOs. And for some reason, I've got my own feelings about it. For some reason, after 12 months, they pulled the funding, and the crime rate went back up again. And I truly believe it's because I believe that the criminal justice system, this is I can't tell you for fact, but my opinion is because the criminal justice system is owned by wealthy middle-class people, they don't want the crime rate to go down too much. Marina.
Yeah. Will, I just needed to challenge you.
I knew it somehow.
Well, I'm just fascinated by your reluctance to talk about forgiveness, because I've heard it before. And you see, I think people can talk about forgiveness and say, I forgive, and they don't. And people can also say, I don't, and they do. It's really not very clear-cut. When I talk about forgiveness, I often think about the elements. And you display all the elements. So you talked about curiosity. For me, that's the key first. You talk about understanding, you talk about perspective change, you talk about letting go of resentment, you talk about empathy, and your life has been about making meaning. All the aspects of forgiveness. So I think you think forgiveness means condoning. I think you think it means letting someone off the hook. And I think you think it's about making an excuse. But I think it's all about definitions. And maybe, actually, because I think you have forgiven Peter. I think it's absolutely clear to me.
I knew this was coming up. Oh, God, I have to think. Oh, I'm not good at thinking anymore. Perhaps I'm still confused as to what forgiveness is. Perhaps you're that. Yeah, I think that's probably right. And we can talk about it, Marina. But yes, perhaps I'm still confused.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Look for the last time.
I'd like to very quickly thank you so much for sharing your personal experience with us. So thank you to everyone who shared their personal experiences today, to those of you who have attended, who spoke, to the organizing committee, everyone that really made this wonderful day possible. So thank you to all of you, and I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow.